to Jeff Cameron Show 93.3 Real Talk Radio, Warchant TV. I'm on the road. In the interest of transparency, today's show recorded so I can speak to the Seminole Club in Pensacola. I leave Tallahassee to go to Pensacola. Look forward to it. But we wanted to give content, as I like to say, so here it is. You know, before the break and twice during the last two segments, I failed to get to it. I wanted to. We were talking about Florida State. We did talk a little bit about DJ. The practice yesterday seemed to be more of the same when they got over there. That, Mike wasn't happy that, first of all, they had to practice indoors away from the North Florida campus that was underwater. So they ended up in an indoor practice facility, Tom, which was air conditioned when they first got there. It was icy cold, and Mike was not happy about that. Had them turn off the air. About midway through that practice, it got a lot hotter. That's still a reprieve for those players. I don't really care about that. I get it. He's doing his, Junction Boys thing, and he's trying to get guys to work real hard and be in uncomfortable situations and uncomfortable circumstances, and the sleeping conditions aren't great, and the players complain the cots are too small, all that stuff. Okay, fine. How'd they play? How'd they practice? How'd they do? And it sounds like it was another disjointed up and down practice where the offense had some success. It was mitigated most stretches, though, by the defense. At one point, Aslan pointed out in the wrap yesterday with Ira that there were 13 consecutive incomplete passes. This is more of the same from what we've seen from this offense so far in camp. And I think it's caused people to react in a way in which they think this offense is going to stink. You and I have pushed back on that, saying, no, I don't think it's going to stink, but I think it has a ways to go. And I think it's going against a top 10 defense. A top 15 defense. I think that's what it's going against, and that is a problem. And if you don't have a star at wide receiver, a number one that is going to be able to make plays despite being covered consistently, then you're going to have days where the offense really sputters. And until they play somebody who doesn't have those guys, by the way, here's some insight. They're playing Georgia Tech, who doesn't have those guys on defense. So it could be that this offense ends up being a lot better than the doom and gloom that's being described with the inconsistencies of practice on a daily basis in Tallahassee, because they're not facing those guys. And I think that's what's going to happen. Plus, as you pointed out yesterday, they're going to run the ball. They're going to run the ball. When they run the ball, it opens up the passing game. You get more one-on-one situations.
Yeah, I think, this is where I'm looking at next week's itinerary. I believe it's Monday is the longer of the 2 days. It might be Tuesday, but I'm looking at it for me because I want to get that extra 25 minutes. There are some days where they push, like they did this past Monday when they were practicing through the storm. That practice went on and on and on. And sometimes in those days when they go 11 on 11, Mike decides. And what I mean by Mike decides, he says, oh, I'm throwing counter punches. I'm not talking about counter run calls. I'm throwing counter punches. I'm throwing trick plays, haymakers. I'm getting you off balance. And we've seen that enough over the last couple of years in camp, whether it was Jordan at quarterback or maybe somebody else was in there in a given day. And you watch the defense have to react to being completely off balanced because they can guess the sequencing of the play calls. They can guess the type of play calls based upon formations. And Mike says, no, I'm going to decide that today is a day that I'm going to put on the cap that I put on when we play on Saturdays, which is I'm going to break tendencies. I'm going to, out of the certain formation, run something you've never seen before. I look forward to seeing that a little bit next week. I'm sure that's coming in this scrimmage on Saturday because this scrimmage, which happens in the morning, I'm assuming is going to be more game-like. They just did the situational thing 2 Saturdays ago. And my point in saying all of that is, there is a point at which in camp that you need to build the confidence of your players on offense. If the defense is continually winning over and over again, after you get past that second scrimmage, it's not long before you get into game week type practices rather than camp practices, which is where you go against the scout team, which will still be talented for Florida State because this defensive group is very deep, but it's not going to be AZ and Fentrell. Like you're breaking them down right now. But the building up process is coming, and I think that happens twofold. Number one, that's where Mike Norvell, evil play caller Mike Norvell, rears his head, and the defense has something to think about. And then secondly, you work with the scout team. The big limiting factor in all of this is that the running game is just hard to assess in the practices that we're at. You don't go to the ground. the whistle blows in a certain circumstance, and that might have been wrong one way or the other. It could have been a 70-yard gain. It could have been a 3-yard gain, and you feel like it could work opposite. So there's a lot of elements and limiting factors to how we can assess how productive this offense is going to be. I think the biggest one is what you said. We're not going against the Florida State defense every weekend when we play this season. Far from it. Maybe 2 or 3 times a season, we will face a defense that's as good as the one that we're going to roll out there.
Clemson's will be, yeah.
Yeah, Clemson's. Miami might have a chance. I mean, you're just looking at again, up and down the athletes that have been recruited. Notre Dame might have a chance.
Notre Dame will have a good defense, yeah.
Florida might even have a decent defense at certain segment groups. I'm not saying that their 11 will be as good as our 11. There's a lot of – last year taught me a lot. Last year taught me a lot of, hey, man, don't expect A because you see Florida State going against Florida State every day. Wait till they get out on the field and see them play their opponents to get a true sense. And these receivers might find themselves open a hell of a lot more than they are right now in week 1. And you'll see smiles on their face, perhaps relief on the sidelines. And, oh, it can be easy sometimes.
Do you go through the same stretches of daydreaming and or thought about a season that I do where, you know, I bring this up a lot because I think it's helpful maybe for myself and maybe other people can relate to it. I don't know. But, you know, it's a theme in sort of existential crisis, right? Which is that we suffer more in the imagined than we ever do in the real world, you know, and that is, I do that all the time when I'm thinking about any subject, right? It could be life and death, could be family, could be finances, could be football. You know, you conjure these images up and these scenarios up in your mind that can really kind of form and get out of control. And I see scenarios where this program, this season, this season goes off the rails a little bit. Like I can create that.
Yeah.
I can create scenarios by which that's true. And I can also create scenarios where everybody stays healthy and we get better each week that goes by and they build off the week before and all of a sudden they're a juggernaut by week 7. You know, I can do that too. And I play them both out in my head and I go for, I try to think of the realistic ways those two scenarios could play out, but those are both extremes. Those are both like, okay, what would have to happen for all of our expectations to be shattered? You know, to have none of what we're hoping is true about this team play out. Well, DJ's not as good as we hope he could be in this offense, and he is his worst self that we've seen, which for some stretches at a time was not a very good college quarterback. And there would be, you know, obviously anybody who goes through a scenario like this you'd sprinkle in some injuries that you can't have. Mm-hmm. You know, you would do that as well. The teams were able to stack and stop the run because they didn't respect the passing game and the receivers weren't winning one-on-one situations. And therefore, maybe a team's weakness against the run is mitigated because they can walk a man up into the box and say, no, we don't think you can consistently complete passes in one-on-one situations against our defensive backs. We trust them. You know, and if Clemson's able to do that, if Notre Dame's able to do that, if Florida's able to do that, if Miami's able to do that, then you got a problem on your hands. You know, all of a sudden you're looking at 4 and 5 losses, and that would be a disaster, given that they just went 13-0 and where we think this program is headed. The other way to look at it, of course, is that is an extreme, and there's an extreme on the other side of it, where you stay completely healthy and you are able to run the football because you've got grown-ass men, seasoned veterans that are old. Old is good on the offensive line. That's not a bad descriptor. And that you have a quarterback that's played 1 million football games, who's seen every look that a defense can throw at him, who's going to utilize his legs and won't be afraid to run. In fact, the game will be called that way so that you're aggressive with an extra runner that creates a math problem for defenses, which is going to give you one-on-one opportunities. And you have some good young players that through sheer athleticism may take them a little while to figure out scheme, but they're going to win some one-on-one battles because they're so talented. Because Elijah Moore is 6'3", 6'4", and can jump. He's going to win those battles because you have an experienced guy who comes over from Alabama and has played in big games and has had the opportunities. And, you know, that That's also a scenario. You got a 6'7" tight end that's going to be a tough cover. There's all these things, but they're all extremes. And I just think we reached the point in camp where we don't ever talk about what's probably more likely is that it's something in between.
Yeah. Oh, I think there's an oversaturation point. You see the team so much, and it fortifies. It's not as good as it seems. It's not as bad as it seems. Like the defense, I think is going to be quite good. I don't know that they're going to be world beaters. And the offense, I think it's just styles make fights, right? This offense does not match up well with this defense. I think that's the way I would put it. And now, not many offenses are going to match up well with this Florida State defense, but you might look for a different group of 11 to be ideally constructed to take on this Florida State defense. The skill position, it's just say you got a certain amount of skill points. You might throw more at receiver than you might throw at running back in order to be able to combat what this defense brings to the table. And I think that's part of it. The other part of it is this: every year under Mike Norvell that we've been able to go to practice, every camp that we've been able to go prior to 2024, the team's gotten better. Every single camp for multiple years, the team got better and better and better. And it's just hard for this team as constructed to be better than last year's team. Now, I'm not talking about record. I'm just talking about dynamic NFL level play. 13-0, you can improve on 13-0. I get that. But what I'm saying is we know that this team is deeper, but we know that this team doesn't have as much dynamic talent. And I think for us, and even though I haven't been to one practice this fall camp, I felt it in spring. You walk out of it going, this is the first time I would call family members after I got out of day 2 or day 3 of camp. Wouldn't tell them specifics. I'd just say they're better. They're better than they were last time I saw them, last camp that I saw them. This is the first time in a few years where that's just straight up not the case. They might be able to maximize what they are and produce a record that's very close to what last year's group did. They might be able to do just that, but they don't have as much dynamic talent as last year's group did. So I think as media members, we're also trying to wrestle with that a little bit.
Yeah, and I think as deep as the running back room is, let's remember Trey Benson was the second running back off the board in last year's NFL draft. You know how good you have to be the second running back the entire country? All the running backs that play football and college football, and there's a lot of good ones. Trey was the second back selected in the NFL draft. Keon Coleman, first pick of the second round, second pick of the second round, whatever it was? Yeah. First pick of the second round. So in essence, first round +1. This is a guy, and I'll grant you, it was a loaded receiver draft, so he's not the second receiver taken, but he is still in the upper echelon of all wide receivers who played college football last year. That's what he is. That's how the NFL saw him. That's the talent that he was. You lose those two guys to go along with a quarterback who had played 1 million snaps in your system and was a feared runner. Now, I know it took some time, and about midway through the season, coupled with the receivers getting hurt, people began to figure out Jordan wasn't going to run. And they also began to figure out that the team that scorched LSU is no longer that team, that they're hurt, they're banged up, guys are missing time, or they're half of what they were. But for a good portion of that first half of the season, people were scared to death defensively that Jordan would kill them with their legs. Yeah. So you had that element still working for you. You take all of that away, it stands to reason as you break guys in now to this system, a new quarterback, new receivers, new running backs, that it is going to take a little time and it is going to be disjointed. So I try to come back to that, understanding that I don't think they're special at wide receiver at all. And that is something that will have to be worked around. They're going to have to work around that.
Yeah, and if they do become dynamic and special, it's because of the Yeah. So go back to recent history. It's getting longer from now or longer away, but 2013 is an all-time team. We get it. 2014 was as talented, if not maybe a skosh more, because Dalvin Cook was on that roster. And they didn't have the process. They didn't have the culture that 2013 had. And that's why they won 13 games and they got to the playoff, but it wasn't the same. 2015 was a team that didn't have a defined plan at quarterback. That's Everett Golson and Sean McGuire back and forth. that had a championship level defense. The offense was a question. That defense was outstanding.
It was a very good defense, but you've got me thinking once again how it's possible Coach Fisher screwed that up to the point where we have to take Everett Golson in to be over Sean McGuire, and we're coming off of back-to-back undefeated seasons. Sweet Jesus, Coach.
They invented a way to lose the game to Georgia Tech. Clemson just beat him straight up. We gave Clemson a good fight, but we just, they hit more situations than we did on the road that year. So essentially, outside of an outlier performance, you're looking at 11 wins. They won 10 games, but you're looking at 11 wins with a flawed team. You know what I mean? It wasn't 13 or 14, but they had enough pieces to get to 10 wins, 10-plus wins. And, in this modern era, I think they probably would have qualified for the ACC championship game, but they were divisions, of course, in 2015. My point is that team, I feel like, had more flaws on offense than this team does, because this offensive line's better than that offensive line in 2015. I get that they had Dalvin Cook, but he erased the offensive line deficiencies. I think this offensive line is better than that one. That was a flawed team that probably should have won 11 games in the regular season. So while last year's team had strengths left and right, at least on paper, a lot of those strengths got injured on offense, but that team had a lot of strengths. This team can have more flaws and still be a group that wins 10, 11 games. And what are we really complaining about at that point? Because we know it's not last year's roster with proven talent. You're going to need some guys to emerge, and then you're going to need some health to be on your side. But give me a shot at a season with the trench play that I think we're going to have. Because I think our trench play is going to be better when you look at both lines of scrimmage combined. Last year's had a much better defensive line, I think, when you're going 6 deep, 7 deep, 8 deep. But this year, especially in the interior, this year, I think both lines of scrimmage, when you combine those two as a factor, if you want to put them into a power rating, this is a strong team. This is a really strong team that should win both lines of scrimmage most games that it plays.
Yeah, two players that have to have great years for them to kind of transcend beyond a projected 10-win season, right? Marvin Jones Jr. and DJ Uyunglele. So those two players have to have great years. Yeah. I think if they do, then we can be something more than what we think we are right now. I believe that. If DJ's really good and Marvin is really good, because I know Patrick Payton's going to be good. So if Marvin Jones is really good, and DJ takes a step forward, yeah, man, they could be really, really good, because I think they have a lot of other areas that they're very strong in. I agree with you. The line of scrimmage on both sides being one of them. I think Kyle Morlock's a problem for people. It's one thing to say, okay, well, who's that other tight end? I got it. But you can know that the main tight end you have to focus on is Kyle Morlock, the returner, the guy who comes back from last season, who you have film on. Yeah, he's 6'7", man. Good luck with that. Yeah. I mean, lots of people know that somebody who is of that build is going to be a problem, but they don't stop him because he's still 6'7". He's, it's like I give the Kelce example all the time. Everybody knows Travis Kelce's really good. Everybody. He's been good forever. He's going straight to the Hall of Fame. Everybody knew Gronk was really, really good. They all knew he was great. Got to shut down Gronk. Nobody did.
Yeah. And this offense, again, I'll go to the point that you made way back in the spring when you were feeling bullish on this group, and you said, this offense may be more productive than last year's offense.
I did.
There's a chance that
I don't know that I buy that anymore, but yeah, I did say that.
There's a chance that it is, because again, if you win first and second down,
oh yeah,
guys are going to come open just because you're succeeding on first and second down. Last year's group let's just put it this way. Last year's group did it the hard way. They really did the hard way. They made it hard on themselves, and then they also got hurt. But they had to do things the hard. The Clemson game was it's not a stellar offensive performance. It's a bad offensive performance. 3 quarters of bad, and yet they found a way to go make a play when they needed to. Same thing in the Boston College game. I mean, they make a couple of plays here and there early on, but that's an uneven effort. You could point to the Southern Miss game, the lack of success on first and second down. The Pitt game was a slog. I mean, for the Wake Forest game was what we thought we were going to get all season. The second half of LSU is what we thought we were going to get all season, and it just wasn't so. That's not Miami wasn't easy either. So the season didn't play out the way that we thought the collection of talent suggested it should. Just because this collection of talent suggests that it's not as as dynamic as last year, doesn't mean this offense can't be as explosive. 2 seasons ago, far less talent, far more explosiveness and results than last year. It's just football's weird like that.
Yeah, they have a chance to be a more complete team. I would agree with that. I think they could be a more complete team this year. It doesn't mean they'll have a better record. It'd be impossible to have a better record unless they win the national championship and go undefeated. But I do think they could be more complete, and that there's some balance on this offense maybe that is not predicated on Trey Benson going 80 yards after 5 straight carries of 1 or 2 yards. You know, like you may have 2nd and 6. You may have 3rd and 2 because of the run game. Okay.
Your receivers just got better because they're going to be open in one-on-one. You know what I mean? Like you make them better through success on the ground. But your doomsday scenario I'm an overthinker too. It's a strength when you're doing clock management stuff at the end of a game and watching the game.
Yeah.
But it's a weakness when you're in this moment. If you fail and you don't establish the run with consistency,
you're dead. You're dead.
And we're rotating 2 or 3 backs and they never get into a rhythm. That would be my fear, is that we over-rotate the backs and we don't let guys get into a rhythm.
No, I think if they fail in the run game, it's not that. It'll be because the offensive line isn't as good as we think they are. And if that's the case, you're doomed. You're going to go 8-4, 7-5 if that happens. But I don't think that's going to happen.
Yeah,
Let me be clear. I want to be clear because somebody hears that and they'll take it out of context. I don't think that's going to happen. But if they aren't able to run the football the way that they want to run the football, and what they did was build to this point where they were going to run, and they can't, it's a 2nd consecutive year where they struggle to do that consistently. They don't have Keon Coleman to bail their ass out. They don't have Johnny Wilson to bail their ass out. They don't have that mismatch consistently at wide receiver to bail them out, where you can throw a jump ball and be like, we're going to win some of these just because we've got a 1st or 2nd round draft pick at wide receiver. They don't have that. And they won't get bailed out. Those Jordan Travis throws in big moments where the game has been, muddied because we can't run the ball on 1st down ever, and we can't win 1st down ever. You're not bailing your ass out this year. You'll lose games. Period. They went undefeated last year in spite of all that. They won't this year. Chef Cameron Show 93.3 Real Talk Radio, Warchant TV. Time for our collaboration weekly with our friends from ISF, a national company from right here in Tallahassee, Florida. Obviously helping those of you who work in state government, solve for the future, as we say. Realize your dreams. They've helped folks like the Department of Children and Families with feasibility studies, Department of Economic Opportunity, reemployment assistance modernization, Department of Health, grant funding allocation analysis, Department of State, information technology, strategic assessments and planning, Florida Department of Business and Professional Regulation, customer experience modernization. Imagine that, right? I mean, all of these things. They've done process innovation, which from a technology standpoint is huge. Background screening clearinghouse processes for the Agent of Healthcare Administration. Compensation studies. We all like to get paid. Helping folks out with the Florida Guardian Ad Litem, Florida Department of Revenue, etc. That is our friends. That's what they do at ISF. They realize and collaborate with you, your dreams, make it more efficient, streamline that process with technology. Let's go. How do we want to solve for the future today, Tom? You want to look big picture? You want to look at Florida State, or do you want to look somewhere else? I got a story for you.
Oh, okay.
I got 2 stories for you. Here you go. Well, how about we revisit something? You recall the conversation, and I figure if I brought this up once before, I should bring it back up here again. Remember the conversation about ESPN Plus? With the streams and the more live sports than any other platform in the country, and how they were losing. Remember when they were losing money, Tom? And we were like, "Ooh, this is going to get interesting."
Yeah, is this relative to their news bundle service with all the other groups, or just ESPN itself?
Well, this is the latest information on all of what they're doing, and they are now making money. And I bring this up because it is important to look at from the standpoint of what's going to happen to the ACC network, what's going to happen to us leaving the ACC and everybody else involved. But here is the latest information on that. For those that don't know, I get I follow a few sites that are sports business. Everybody knows about the Sports Business Journal. There's Front Office Sports. There's a lot of different things that you can read on these things. And I don't mind giving updates because it affects the future, and this is solving for the future. ESPN Plus, as I noted, streams more live sports than any other platform. it costs the parent company, Disney, billions of dollars annually. There was a time where that was costing them money. They were losing money. But on Wednesday, that's yesterday, they reported earnings from its fiscal third quarter, which ended June 29th. The company brought in revenue of $23.2 billion. That's higher than what Wall Street had predicted. The unexpected good news for Disney came from its direct-to-consumer unit, Disney Plus, ESPN Plus, and Hulu, Tom, turning in a profit for the very first time. Those streaming services combined to post a surplus of $47 million, $66 million profit from ESPN Plus that helped offset the $19 million loss from Disney and Hulu alone. So those combining offset that, and they made a surplus of $47 million. Their forecast, Disney's original forecast, its overall streaming unit to become profitable next quarter permanently. The ad market is strong and healthy for us, says Hugh Johnston. That's the CFO. Sports for everyone. Disney still expects to launch an enhanced standalone ESPN flagship streaming service in the fall of 2025. They are not yet sure what they're going to price that out. It will be separate from ESPN Plus. So Venue Sports, ESPN's joint streaming venture with Fox and TNT, and sports parent Warner Brothers Discovery, on track to launch in the fall, and that's where we're at. So ESPN's future, Iger addressed Disney's ongoing efforts to potentially sell an equity stake in ESPN to a league like the NFL or a league like the NBA. So that's a lot of people believe the NFL has widely been seen as the partner, continues to evolve in its own media division. We know that they have everything from Amazon, Thursday Night Football. There is still further rumors that the future of professional football's biggest games are going to be behind paywalls, and that includes the Super Bowl.
Yeah, so, well, there's just a little bit to chew on there, or maybe everything that has to do with the future of the business. It's bad news in certain ways. You're going to get consolidation. This is like when Clear Channel took over radio. What you're going to see, I believe, homogenized
and ruined radio forever. Yes.
Yeah. What you're going to see are, a few choice talking heads instead of options. Now, there aren't huge ratings for FS1's morning show, or even First Take gets 1 million and they do backflips over that. And that, from time to time it does. Good Morning Football. And, I think they're all going to get folded into a couple of key networks. Like you see what they did with Good Morning Football, NFL Network. They moved it from the East Coast back over to the league office in the West Coast. They're no longer in New York. They start at 8 a.m. They don't start at 6. They're not leasing that office anymore. They put it in the same studios that they do the pregame stuff, which NFL Game Day Morning is an awesome show. But they moved their Good Morning Football show to that headquarters. Like what you're seeing here is consolidation. And let's just say that the NFL, for example, does earn an equity share or buy in to ESPN itself, or the NBA does. And those shows on their own networks are just going to be on ESPN. There's no need for a separate network. Like they're going to cut their costs down. TV trucks are going to be consolidated. That's the bad news. The other piece of interesting news to me, ESPN still wants to release their own streaming app, and they still want to do the thing with TNT and NBC and CBS and get together and have an all-encompassing app. I don't know that many people are going to be buying the ESPN-specific platform. And most people would just buy the big one with all the networks so they get all the major sporting events. So I don't know what the pricing structure is going to look like for that. Lastly, and if you're a big nerd on streaming stuff, I tend to be, I find it fascinating that ESPN was the one to carry the torch there, that they netted over $65 million in profit, which represents 49 million or whatever it is net when you combine Disney and Hulu. The price increase is coming for all those groups anyway. They keep doing that. It's going up another $3 or $4 a month. But for example, Disney, greenlit the latest Star Wars show that did like okay returns. Their budget was $225 million for that show. And I got to tell you, the visual effects look like they spent $50. It wasn't very good at all. And what people are wondering now is, for Netflix, for Hulu, for HBO Max, which is just Max now, there were huge budgets for House of Cards. There were huge budgets for Peaky Blinders and a lot of these shows.
Great shows.
but the money's not there. They're going to dial back those production costs. That's what's killing them. I find it. ESPN has been the redheaded stepchild that's been in the red forever and a day.
Yeah,
But it seems like finally in this market, all of the acquiring of live sports, which they've been taking a bath on, is finally starting to pay off for them. So it'll be interesting to see what decisions they make moving forward.
In the era of amenities, we talked last hour about the ones that Florida State will have at Doak Campbell Stadium, what Duke is doing, what other schools are doing. I add to these kinds of conversation starters that are fun. The Titans are going to launch a new dedicated fan section in their future stadium. It's known as the Mosh Pit, by the way. The Mosh Pit.
So does it have access directly to the tailgate lots? Because they should just send those folks in.
Access to seats by a live stage, dedicated invitations to events, complimentary annual merchandise sent to those members of the Mosh Pit, exclusive chance, by the way, to buy specially priced PSLs. You have to submit videos in order to apply. So, yeah, I don't like where all of this is headed in stadiums, Tom. I am going to be the old man. This is not good. We're going to have a special stage area in the middle of the stadium. And on the 50, Tom, on the 50, there's a section for this mosh pit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think some of this, the market, a.k.a. the fans, are going to regulate. And they're not going to want to be a part of it. They're going to say it sucks, and some of these ideas will get scrapped. I myself, this was me 10 years ago. I'd rather go to a place like Corner Pocket and watch my stuff on baseball.
Yeah.
I'd rather have a tall boy for under $10. And I'd rather have all the games in front of me instead
and not deal with people. Yes.
That was the thing that they campaigned against here at Florida State, Doak HD. There's nothing like going to the game. That is true. You get more inside your rib cage. You feel more when you're there. If it's
a good game, if it's a game against a rival, that is true. It is not true against Southern Miss.
I think, yes, correct. It used to be a badge of honor, and it is for several people still out there. Like I know one of our buddies who owns a deli downtown, Rob. He's been to every game, going back and back and back. It's a badge of honor, and it's a point of pride, and it's a tradition. It's what you do.
And there's nothing wrong with that. I'm not telling people to not go to the game, but you cannot argue that they're all built the same. They're not.
Correct. That is true. You're right. You can't tell people that's not the right thing to do because everybody experiences things differently. Maybe it's because I got into the field that I'm in. And I
think this is a big part of it, yeah.
And I think it's also the age bracket that I'm in. Like, give me 2 games a year and let's go to the wall. Let's everything. I want all the trimmings. Yeah. Twice a year. If that means I got to go third party, I got to go third party site and I got to spend a little bit extra. Well, then I'm not dropping an extra $800 per ticket for the season for a season ticket. Just give me 2 games and let's make this an event. Otherwise, I'm going to the bar or I'm putting a second or third TV in my home.
Penn State's football team upgraded its menus and dining as part of a $31.9 million facility renovation, by the way, Tom. So we're staying with a theme on today's show. The entire team called in chefs and nutrition staff to thank them. They unveiled this recently. They have a huge menu now compared to what they've had in the past if you are part of a group that buys in, not unlike, let's say, the Champions Club at Florida State, something along those lines. I suspect, however, based on what I've seen from clicking on those links, the menu's better than what they have at the Champions Club or what they had at the Champions Club.
The Lang Memorial, that is. Yeah. The one thing that's important here, maybe this is the lead that's been buried. If ESPN and our consumer economy, because this does get into the economy as well, if there's enough advertising revenue out there, enough advertisers who want to bid on these places, live sports, they want to spend on live sports, that is good news for Florida State. As we're trying to move from one place to another, you would like the market to be a bull and not a bear in terms of advertising markets. We can get into a debate about, the consumer side, the labor side, but just as it pertains to networks,
yes,
whether or not they can fill their breaks and sell their spots for more money, The more that's happening when Florida State is trying to move from one place to the other,
given the diamond status of the asset that they are, yes.
Right. The more apt ESPN or Fox would be to go spend the money to acquire them. And by spend, I mean, maybe we'll offset your legal costs. Maybe we'll offset your payment to the ACC like they did for Texas and Oklahoma. Or maybe we'll be more willing to give you a full share as you arrive. Like the more that these networks are happy, the more apt they are to say, okay, let's go grab another asset. Because if money's tight, they're saying, we're not doing anything. We're standing pat, and we're going to see what happens.
And finally, as we talk about the future of sports and we as consumers view these changes and conversations surrounding tickets and amenities and the like, the Cleveland Browns have made their preference known and announced that they want a new stadium. They've already proposed the new stadium site. It's about 15 miles from where their current site is. They even released a video, Tom, a little hype video showing the new dome that they would like to play football in. No more of those glorious days with the freezing weather and the snow coming in for a playoff game in Cleveland. They want to play in a dome, and they had a nice little letter to the fans. You know, I skipped through all that. I saw the artist rendering. I saw where they want to go. A dome stadium also, they said, enhances their chances to someday host events like, you know, the Super Bowl or a Final Four or a college football playoff game, MMA fights, concerts, and the like. They want all of that. Their current stadium does not allow for that. Nobody's playing the Super Bowl in Cleveland outdoors. I can assure you of that. And they're talking about what they're looking at as the Brook Park site. That's fine. I said, I wonder how much they're going to ask the city to pay for this, because there's nothing I hate more than owners of football teams, billionaires themselves, who are only going to make more money down the line, saying they're too broke to fund the business that they run, that they don't want to build the stadium on their own dime, but rather the city should, and if they don't, they'll leave. We'll just leave you in the lurch. Despite 100 years of support, we'll move in the dead of night and tell you to go F yourself. Well, the Browns did make that announcement rather subtly at the end of the video and through an email. They're seeking a 50-50 partnership with the city. No, man, you build it. You build it. We're trying to fund schools and roads and things with the money that we have through taxes. How about you build your stadium, billionaire owner? Man, can you imagine? Hey, you know what? I'd like to open a coffee shop. You know who I want to pay for it? Tallahassee.
Well, yeah, you wouldn't believe the economic impact that my coffee shop will have on this neighborhood. I've got some numbers to that effect. You wouldn't believe it.
I bet you do.
We're going to employ 6 people. And those 6 people are going to help generate over $300 million to the community.
Well, you know, I don't want to get into the studies that have shown that anyhow. Well, yeah, you know where we're going with that. But there you go. And
ISF knows they might be involved in some of that stuff where they can tell you the numbers what they really are.
Well, they could, and they do that for people all around the country. We love our friends at ISF. Check out. If you want to know more, learn more of how they work, what they do, all those things, ISF.com. Come back, wrap it up momentarily. Jeff Cameron Show, 93.3 Real Talk Radio, Warchant TV. Wrapping it up, back with you live, probably in studio tomorrow on a Friday is what's going to happen. Today's show recorded, as I've mentioned throughout, but we always have to tell folks that. Legally, we're owed that. Mets play last night, Tom?
Yeah. Escaped with a W in Colorado. Has not been the roadie that I was hoping for.
But you won the game.
Won the game. So they are 4-4 on this road trip, I think.
All right.
Yeah, 4-4. 3-3, something like that.
Pirates lost in 10, took a 1-run lead into the 9th. Bednar gave up a home run that still hasn't landed, which tied the game at 6. In the 10th, Holderman came in and gave up 3 runs because that's what he does these days. He's at this point, a shell of the pitcher that made up the first half of the season. The Pirates somehow load the bases despite not having a hit. In the bottom of the 10th, they scored 2 runs to make it 9-8. They have 2 chances to just score a guy from third with a sac fly, anything. They could have won the game with a base hit. They did neither, and they lost the game 9-8. And we are now I think one game under 500 after being a robust 4 above at one point here briefly. We're now 56 and 57. And I think I'm pretty close to officially saying they've got 0 chance to win that wild card. So
it's getting difficult because this is a stretch of the year where somebody just doesn't lose. And unfortunately, 2 teams are doing that. Arizona is just not going to lose ever.
Arizona, if they continue to play this way, is going back to the World Series.
Yeah, they're getting more pitching back. Their lineup has been remarkable. Josh Bell hit 2 home runs yesterday in the first game of a doubleheader with the Guardians. They swept the Guardians, who had the best record in the bigs. You could say AL Central, but still, man, like Cleveland's a good ball club. They swept them 3.
Yeah, they did, and that is former Pirate Josh Bell, of course, who could have been comfortably seated over at first base where the Pirates could use some help. But yes, the other team that doesn't lose is San Diego, who's beating us right now, and they're beating everybody they're going to play. Hey, by the way, don't look now if you're the Dodgers. What are you, 4 games up on the Padres? You better be careful, man. That Padres lineup, I watched it up close and personal the last 2 games. They don't have weakness 1 through 9. They hit. They all hit.
Yep. So the Mets are 8 back of the Phillies in the standings, a half a game back of Atlanta for the 3rd wild card spot. And it's going to be on Atlanta to get their act together. If they do, it's going to be tough. The Phillies schedule down the stretch is so brutally difficult over these next 7 weeks that I feel like if I was to handicap it now, the Mets are 2.5 out of the 1st wild card. I think it might be easier to get to the 1st place in the NL East division placeholder than it would be to get number 1 wild card. I think Arizona's taking off, man. I don't think that's going to stop.
It's the same for the Pirates. They have to basically win the division because the Brewers could fall off a cliff. They haven't been great. And if you could do that, you could win the division. But listen, at this point, and also this is where the schedule catches up with you. Pittsburgh began the second half of the season with Arizona and the Padres, followed by Arizona and the Padres. Thanks, guys. Appreciate you.
It's a fascinating discussion for you baseball people out there. It's like, what are the Dodgers right now? What are the Phillies right now? Because in the first 2 months of the season, you said they're the 2 teams that'll be playing for the pennant. And now it's like, I'm not so sure. I'm not so sure that either of them are going to be in that final series for the National League. Now, the Braves are in that conversation too. I'm not, just assuming the Mets would jump over. I'm just saying the Braves might be in a similar line of thinking. If they can get their act together, because they generally pitch well, you could run down Philadelphia with the schedule they have left. More than you could run down, I think, Arizona in that wild card spot. Thankfully, there are 3 of them, but I'm sorry to see you are slightly bowing out of the race. I was hoping that pitching would put you in the conversation.
Well, they've somehow screwed this up. First of all, Jared Jones hasn't pitched since before the All-Star break, so your number 2, who was a stud, has not pitched at all. And Paul Skeens, over a 14-game stretch, is going to pitch twice. So somehow they screwed this all up going into the second half of the season. Meanwhile, we got guys like Gonzalez and Perez and bums like that are going to pitch 3 and 4. Well, we traded Perez finally, but anyhow, it's very, very frustrating. Games being played currently as you're listening to this: Giants, Nats. That's Kyle Harris and DJ Hertz. Brewers, Braves are on right now. Frankie Montas, Charlie Martin. Padres, Buccos. Well, I'm driving, probably frustrating me. Randy Vasquez, Luis L. Ortiz. Your Mets and Rockies just after the show ends today here, Tom. David Peterson and Austin Gomber. Reds, Marlins, Hunter Green, Kyle Tyler. We got the Angels and the Yankees, Tyler Anderson and Nestor Cortez.
Nestor.
Orioles, Blue Jays, Dean Creamer, Kevin Gosman. Rays, Cardinals, Shane Baez, Kyle Gibson. Tigers, Mariners, TBD and Bryant. Woo! Phillies, D-backs, Colby Allard, Jordan Montgomery. And that is a look at those that shall reside on the bump. Hey, it's interesting. It's been fun. I like the moves the Pirates made at the break, but they haven't been able to rely on their pitching because some guys have been banged up, and they just don't hit enough. There are 4 guys in this lineup that are just black holes. They just don't hit. Just don't hit at all. Awfully hard to overcome.
That's what's happening. My squad, it seems like everybody's hot or nobody's hot, and that's frustrating. In 2 games in Colorado, I think they've scored 7 runs. It might be 8, but man, you got to do better. But this lineup was scoring 20 in Yosemite It's a 2-game stretch, and
Yeah.
right now it's just not so hot.
Before we sign off, one thing to note, again, we'll be back live with you tomorrow, and that scrimmage that is to take place on Saturday, I think, is the last of the live, kick-ass. We're not going to see it, but that's a go scrimmage. That is a August the 10th. You play the 24th. Let's get it on one last time kind of scrimmage. I don't think the last scrimmage is that way. I think this scrimmage is the one where the meat and potatoes, let's get after it. Guys get time to kind of get past getting dinged if they get hurt in that situation or beat up a little bit. This will be an interesting Saturday. So we have a lot to look forward to in that regard. Of course, we have all the reports from over in Jacksonville from Aslan and Ira. Go to warchant.com, get signed up today. Why haven't you done that yet? $1 for 2 months? What are we doing here? The season's upon us.
Yeah, also Wake Up Warchant live tonight. I'll double check on the time there. As I'm double checking on it, though, it's the last scrimmage. They might have a day where they go good on good.
Right. I think there was one more time they're going to be in Doak, but yeah.
But they might do a Doak practice or a big day where they're like, all right, time to get it on. But there's not a scrimmage like this. So for the players, they're going to be hyped up. 6 o'clock tonight. 6 o'clock tonight is Wake Up Warchant, and that'll be good because Aslan will be able to give you a ton of information from what he saw for 2 days over in Jacksonville, and he and Corey will chop it up as they always do.
Good work out of you, good sir. My thanks to all of you. Pensacola Seminole Club, I'm on my way to see you. Can't wait. Have your questions ready to go. See you guys tomorrow. Peace.